very sour. 23, like, it was the only time that I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna come back next year. And you have that thought every time after you finish a really big, hard race. But like that one stuck with me for a couple weeks. Like, I don't know, like the Maah Daah Hey might have won. It's definitely something that crossed my mind. Eventually that feeling fades away and it's like, no, I'm gonna show this thing.
In every story, it's easy to see the main characters, heroes, the focal point of the story. But as the story writing is refined, there are also characters whose story fall to the floor, cut from the narrative. You might recognize them if they are pointed out to you. These are characters that sometimes pass into focus for only a moment. Maybe you didn't even know you should be looking for them. But these stories are not gone. They just need the light to shine upon them. 2 untold tales have been found. 2 stories from this year's Maah Daah Hey 100. This is Maah Daah Hey, and these are the lost chapters.
When you walk around the starting line, for every person who's there, there's a story. And sometimes you know exactly who you're there for. And sometimes you know one of the stories you aren't there for. But sometimes one of the stories ends up grabbing onto you.
My name is Derek Wallace. I'm from New Albin, Iowa. Like any other kid, I grew up, I shouldn't say like any other kid, like most kids, I rode bike, right? It was to get around the neighborhood, hang out with friends. Teenage years, we lived in the country, about 3 miles from a small town, would use the bike to get into town to get all our sugary snacks and to get away. Once I got my driver's license, didn't touch a bicycle again until my early 20s. I got a bike then, discovered dang, you can cover some ground. I somehow got into bike commuting to work. I had a 5-mile commute. So I did that pretty regularly, and then it just kind of became a fun challenge to see how far I could ride. And that turned into me riding that same bike that I commuted on. I rode it from La Crosse, Wisconsin, up to Perham, Minnesota, which is my hometown. I did that in 4 days, wearing gym shorts and a cut-off t-shirt. So that's kind of the origin story of my riding bikes as an adult. And that's kind of where it all started. So I learned about the Maah Daah Hey from my cousin. He reached out and said, hey man, found this really cool race out in western North Dakota. We should go do it. This was only 3 months leading up to the race. All I had was a heavy stump jumper, and I thought, okay, cool. So I went and bought a $1,000 Specialized hardtail. I rode that about 6 times, and I headed out to the Maah Daah Hey with my only hope of finishing. That was it. It was this race looks epic. If I can finish this thing, that would be awesome. I showed up in baggies, a 3/4 tee jersey, all black, which was a huge mistake. The first 20 miles, all I can describe it as is euphoric. It just felt like riding on a cloud. Felt like nothing else I'd ever done. Rode that high until about halfway in, and then it got real. And I found parts of me that I hadn't discovered ever before. So I had no idea what I was getting into. The Maah Daah Hey, my first year, I packed Cliff Bars and water, and that's all I ate. Like, there was no strategy. It was like, show up and try to finish this thing.
My name's Mark Kolsky, and he had mentioned about the Maah Daah Hey, and I had asked a couple more questions about it, and then he said, hey, you should come out and run SAG. You know, my wife's gonna be out there, and it'd be kind of nice to have another person with her so she's not doing it alone. So I said, hey, yeah, sure. He had mentioned something about the weather and how it might be raining this weekend, and it was kind of lingering in the back of our minds, and closer to the end of the week it kind of looked a little better, like it was gonna miss or hit at the end of the day. So it looked more promising that the race was gonna go. Then we got to checkpoint Bravo, and things are good. Derek was just cruising through, and everybody else. Well, as we were getting to checkpoint Charlie, it was getting a little darker, like, okay, this is getting pretty close. This might start, raining. And you have no service, so you can't check the radar out there. And so we were sitting there at checkpoint Charlie for a while, and it just slowly kept getting heavier and heavier and heavier until it was a consistent, not so much a downpour, but a heavy rain. So then it was like getting around the time where we should start seeing racers coming by, and we never did. I think it was one of the staff members, they backtracked on a car. And it was probably 20 minutes before he came back, and he said, there's racers stopped, they're not making it. And so we hopped it back in the pickup, and we turned around, and we didn't get maybe a quarter mile down the road, and we saw racers coming around this little bend, and one guy was pushing his bike, and I think Derek was pushing his a little bit too, and it was you couldn't even see the tires, couldn't even see the spokes. And Derek came up. They had to climb up the ditch a little bit, and I was like, is that Derek? And I could only recognize him by kind of like his jersey. I think it was like 40 some miles they actually officially called the race.
So I first met Derek in 2022 through Mark.
JP was my track coach in high school and cross country, and JP's been riding bikes forever.
And we did the normal, new bicycle friendship thing, followed each other on Strava, we would chat about gear. But over time, we just got to be true friends. What up, homie? Been a long one today. Nutrition is incredible, and I feel awesome.
Dude, January 30th, 54 degrees out here.
By this point, if you're watching this, you probably know that I'm the director of the Maah Daah Hey film series, but you may not know that I have bipolar disorder. And this film series originally was supposed to be one standalone film called Back to the Start. And it was a film we were making about my life and what it was like to race the Maah Daah Hey 100 in 2019 and then be diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 2020, and what it was like to try and rebuild my life after that mental health diagnosis, and ultimately try and get back to the starting line of the Maah Daah Hey 100. And in 2023, the plan was that I would race the Maah Daah Hey 100 and see Derek there and see a lot of my other friends there. But a month before the race, I had a near catastrophic mountain bike accident. I came around the corner on the trails by my house at 20 miles an hour, and a tree had fallen down. And it was a bad accident. The lights went out for 2.5 minutes, and it was very clear that not only was I not going to be able to race the Maah Daah Hey 100 that year, but I had a lot of rehab in front of me. After the accident, the project got put indefinitely on hold, but we had quite a bit of budget money just sitting around, and so with the help of one of my friends, we went out to the race anyways, instead of planning to race, we went there to film. I knew Derek had had a really excellent summer of training. It seemed like he had really put the pieces together finally, and that this was going to be the year.
Maah Daah Hey has become that race for me. Like, it's the motivator through the winter months. Like, once we get through Christmas, that's when like training starts. And being in Northeast Iowa, Southeast Minnesota, like, you spend a lot of hours on the trainer if you want to be fit come spring and summer. So I use Maah Daah Hey as like my motivation, and it's like I'm gonna better last year, you know. Went into it feeling really, really good. The weather came in, we got pushed back a day, and then it turned into an out and back. And the other wrench in 23 is I missed a turn, or I took a turn when I shouldn't have, all because I had lost the wheel of somebody and I started pushing it to try to catch back up. And in that, completely lost focus, took that turn, and I lost another probably 5 minutes. And that, I don't know, just added the stress of like all of it and trying to catch up to them. And I think that's like, I was pushing way more power than I should have. I ended up cramping a ton. Like, I've never cramped before. Like 50 miles on, it was both legs every couple minutes. Like, if I was pushing more than 200 watts, I was gonna cramp. And if I tried to stand up to like open a gate, I would almost fall over. I've never been so close to quitting. Like, I wanted something terrible to happen. I wanted my bike to break, like rim explode. Like, I was just, anything that could go wrong, I was welcoming it. Like, please give me a valid reason to bow out of this thing, because I felt, like I said, I've never had a day like that. It felt terrible. I didn't know you could cramp for 4.5, 5 hours. I didn't know that was possible, and like still be okay. Very sour. 23, like, it was the only time that I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna come back next year. And you have that thought every time after you finish a really big, hard race. But like, that one stuck with me for a couple weeks. Like, I don't know. Like, the Maah Daah Hey might have won. It's definitely something that crossed my mind.
As we came out of the race in 2023, I was still really dealing with all the fallout from my accident. A ton of rehab to try and get my brain working correctly again, to get my eyes working correctly again. And in the process, Derek and I's friendship just grew and grew and grew. He was so incredibly supportive. And so as we got into the springtime, a big part of my rehab was getting out and riding. And the first time that I actually got to ride with someone, I went down to visit Derek, and we got out on the gravel near Houston and went for a spin. And to be out there with a friend, to get to just ride side by side after everything, you know, I had gone through and that we had gone through kind of in the previous year, it was really special.
So like, when I got into cycling, I had no idea about anything, right? And then when I was like, sold the dirt bike, was looking for an actual mountain bike that I could go ride these trails with, I was a little overwhelmed by like everything that there was, right? And like, it seemed different depending on which shop you went into. So like, you go into a quote roadie shop, and that's what they do. And they're like these, I don't know, very, very type A people who ride road bikes, and that's cool. But that wasn't me at the time, and I had no idea what any of that was. So like, that was intimidating for me to figure out like how to clip in, or like that there were actual different style clips, different pedals, different shoes, all of that. So I wanted to open a shop to make it a welcoming place for everybody. So you can come, you can buy your kid's bike, you can buy your bike for your bike path. But I also now have the experience of like doing these events. So I'm fairly knowledgeable in the mountain bike side. I've gotten into the gravel stuff, and I can help direct people in a very non-judgmental way and be like, hey man, like I started just like you, like a few years ago. It is like overwhelming to see all the different options. Like, here's a few things to look at. The Maah Daah Hey was the thing that really drew me into taking cycling seriously, right? Like I did the race that first time and I was like, dang, that was cool, but it sucked the majority of the time. So like, I want to get more serious about this so I can have more fun than only like, you know, the first 25 miles being fun. So that's what kind of got me into the cycling and like looking into more of the details and looking back on it, like that is now what I see as like the inspiration of starting the shop, was like taking somebody like me who just dove out into the Maah Daah Hey and being like, yeah, we can get you to do these cool events. And so
the Back to the Start film kind of got shelved after the accident. It was partly because it was so unclear when I was going to ever be able to ride a bike again. And then once I was cleared to ride again, I was invested in all these other projects like Maah Daah Hey Together and filming at the 2024 race. So I knew I would be there, but I would not be competing. But I also knew in 2024 that Derek would most likely be a factor. And so as we were looking at all these different names of people like Gordon Wadsworth and Thomas Turner and Chris Bessler, another name on that list was Derek Wallace. And honestly, he was high up on the list because I knew what he had done in the past, and I knew if he put the pieces together, he would be right there.
Eventually that feeling fades away and it's like, no, I'm gonna show this thing and I'm gonna go out there and do my best. It's the only race that I've started, and like that first time I was like, this feels awesome. This is amazing. I don't know why. We're out in the middle of nowhere, North Dakota, but the fact that you get to start somewhere and end somewhere over 100 miles away and see something different the whole time, I feel like that's a part of it. Because like I've tried to chase that in other events. I've went to other races being like, this one looks sweet, like this is gonna be awesome. And I've never been able to replicate that feeling that I get while riding the Maah Daah Hey.
We were so confident in what Derek might be able to do on the day that at the start line, we had two of our cameramen split up. And one of our cameramen went with Gordon and Thomas and just followed them around during their warm-up, during getting ready. And one of our cameramen just focused on Derek, and you can see him warming up, you can see him getting ready. Brittany, his wife, is hanging out there with him the whole time. And it was really special to just kind of have an inside view of what he was like. Check A, we had a decision to make. Gordon and Thomas came through almost 2 minutes ahead of the record pace. But the pace to everybody else was so far back that one of our other cameramen just made the decision over the comms and said, we can't wait for anybody else. Like, our day is now focused entirely on Gordon and Thomas. I was down near aid station 1 with our drone pilot, Levi, and we were riding in on the trail to get to our positions where we were going to shoot the riders as they came over the prairie.
Gordon and Thomas are already 8 minutes up on mark. We can't follow you and Chris today.
Can you believe the range on these things? They're like 9 miles away. There was very little time for me throughout the day to look at my phone. But once in a blue moon, when I did have that time and I had service, I would look at the trackers and I could see that he was slowly working his way up in the field. And I just kept thinking, man, I wonder if he can get a podium today. That would be incredible if he could finish in the top 3.
So I had asked Brittany at the last aid. At Wanigan, I saw him roll in before me. I asked Brittany what place I was in. She said, he's 3rd, you're 4th. And I said, okay, see ya. And I grabbed a bottle. I didn't grab anything else, and I just went out. And my hope was that I could pull a gap on him to where he couldn't see me anymore, because a lot of times if you can get out of sight, you're safe then. I did that, and I hadn't seen him for the majority of that stretch then. We had about 6 miles to go, and I looked back and I could see him cresting one of the hills, and man, it just like hits you like a ton of bricks, and you have all the thoughts of like, I should go hard, but like you're in the cave at that point, and you have the thoughts of like, whatever, it doesn't matter, just let him take you. I tried to just stay consistent. He eventually caught me.
Gordon and Thomas finish, and we filmed them doing their thing. But I noticed that Brittany was pacing around a lot. I could feel the tension and the stress she was feeling as she was waiting to see what would happen.
Coming in 9 hours and 18 minutes. Derek Wallace!
So after the race, he and Brittany have their moment, and then he comes over to me, and the first thing he says out of his mouth is, "We're coming back to do this again next year, because you need to finish your story." And I said, "Dude, I can't ride at the speed I did before my accident. Like, I'm not as fast as I was before." And he said, "Doesn't matter. We'll ride whatever we need to. You need to finish this story." And that's the kind of guy he is. That in his greatest moment on the bike, he wasn't thinking about himself, he was thinking about his friends.
For me to end up on the podium at the Maah Daah Hey, I never ever thought that would have happened. Like my first year, I finished 14th. The next year I got 10th. Like I've always been in reach of that top 10. For me to think that I would ever end up on the podium was never a thought. So like when I crossed that day in 3rd place, I was like, that's it. Like I've accomplished everything I've wanted to do here. I never thought I would make it to this spot. And to be able to go out and ride this race with JP was like, dude, we got to do it.
I am extremely proud to know Derek Wallace and to call him a very close friend. And he's going to help me bring a ton of mental health awareness in the bike community. Because the 3rd film in the Maah Daah Hey series will be Back to the Start. And it will feature myself, Derek Wallace, and my very good friend Kelly McGelkey as the 3 of us race the Maah Daah Hey 100 in 2025. together.
This is gonna be fun. I am honestly so excited for this. Like, it'll be a totally different experience for me. But that's what I'm looking forward to, is like a whole nother aspect of this race, and like doing it with a good friend, somebody who I talk to almost daily. To go experience this together is gonna be epic.